This country was founded on compromise. I couldn't go through the front door at this country's founding. And, you know, if we were really thinking about ideal positions, we wouldn't have a union.
Joining me again are Jane Hamsher, founder of FireDogLake.com, Adam Green, founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Ezra Klein of the Washington Post, and Roger Hodge, the author of The Mendacity of Hope. Roger, what do you think was wrong with the president making this deal at this time, given that the Republicans, let's just everybody remember, let's set the table for January. The Republicans take over the House of Representatives. They don't just become a stronger minority. They control it. They control the Ways and Means Committee. A Republican chairman of the committee controls the writing of this bill. They control the agenda. How would you expect to get something better in the next Congress with Republicans controlling the House of Representatives?
Well, let me just say I appreciate the practical wisdom that you bring to this situation, but it's also true, and we have to remember that this situation, this predicament, is of Obama's own making, is of the Democrats' own making. Obama has signaled from the very beginning that he was willing to surrender, and so surrendering again advances no one's interest here except the interests of the top 2%, the super rich. As Sherrod Brown has been saying, what we need to see this president do, what President Obama needs to do, is go on the road and make the case for his putatively preferred policy to the American people and shame the Republicans into doing the right thing. They're not going to do it out of the goodness of their own hearts. All he's doing here is demonstrating...
Can you just stop for a second? Can you cite me a Democratic president who has shamed Republicans into voting for a tax increase of any bracket?
Look, Herbert Hoover, Barack Hoover Obama is not going to win this
fight. But Roger, you're suggesting a strategy that has never worked before, has never been employed before. Name me the Republican
Woodrow Wilson
forced
Congress to take on policies that they didn't want to take on. You know,
can I help answer that question?
Please.
Go ahead, Adam.
Give him hell, Harry. There's a reason he was called Give him hell, because he barnstormed the nation. I told you on this show before, I was in South Dakota when President Bush barnstormed South Dakota and put pressure on my senator, Tim Johnson at the time, and Tim Johnson then did what Bush wanted.
A Democrat.
Why is it essentially different for a Democrat rather than a Republican? The Democrats need to learn from the Republicans.
You've lived in the two-party system long enough and you don't know the difference between a Democrat and Republican on taxes?
No, certainly we know the difference.
There's nothing clearer than the Democrats.
The Democrats always surrender. That's the difference.
Lawrence, you're not making a neutral position.
Adam, finish your point about Tim Johnson. Go ahead. It's a good point.
Tim Johnson, well, it's the same thing. Tim Johnson did what President Bush wanted. When President Obama wanted Dennis Kucinich to vote for his health care plan, he went to his state, commanded local media station attention, rallied his constituents, and Kucinich caved. The fact that you're disputing the idea of a presidential bully pulpit is honestly shocking to me. I don't understand it.
No, I'm simply saying we can't find an example of a modern president forcing a Republican to vote for a tax bracket increase through some sort of shame of doing the responsible thing. We have a very simple record. Democrats are responsible about taxation. Republicans are not. Republicans think they succeed by not being responsible on taxation politically, and they have a pretty good record of getting away with that. Roger, do you know what the bottom tax bracket is, what the actual percentage is in the bottom bracket, the one no one talks about? Everyone's talking about the top bracket these days.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
The bottom tax bracket, do you know what it is, what percent it is?
No.
It's 10%. That's the George Bush bottom tax bracket. You know what happens in January if you don't do something about it? It goes up to 15%, which was the bottom tax bracket under Bill Clinton.
No one wants to see that happen.
No one wants to see. People are advocating that it happen.
No one wants
advocating that it happen. You're saying let it happen.
All due respect.
There's one person here who's saying it shouldn't happen. There's only one person here saying it shouldn't happen, and that's Ezra Klein. We're going to go to him now. Ezra, why shouldn't the Democrats be willing to stunt this all the way through to January, February, March, and fight over this, allow the tax rates to go up to the Clinton level on January 1st? Why did you say that they shouldn't do that they should take a deal before December 31st?
Look, I'm not going to spend 5 seconds defending the administration's strategy or communications here. Both have been horrible. But we're not having a discussion yet in this segment about what this deal looks like. We just struck a deal basically this morning. We should at least say what's in it. And basically, when we talk about the deal Obama wanted to have about a month ago and the deal he's got today, you're talking about two different types of gets, and you have to decide which one is better. In the original deal, the one that some people say we should move back to, he gets an expiration of the Bush tax cuts, over the next two of the Bush tax cuts for upper income earners. Over the next 2 years, those are worth about $133 billion if you include the estate tax. The deal he has right now keeps those, that's $133 billion, but adds on to them about $300 billion in other types of much more progressive and, frankly, much more stimulative tax cuts and tax credits, including $56 billion of unemployment insurance, including $120 billion of a payroll tax cut in 2011. So the question you have to ask is not these sort of abstract questions of strategy, or even, although I do agree with the critique that he's not shown much fight for the progressive side in this, but not even the questions of whether or not he should have fought. The question is, what do you think is a better policy? And more to the point, do you think the tax policy, the ideal tax policy, should be dominant here, or, given the state of the economy, the ideal stimulus policy? The reason I say they shouldn't back down on the deal right now is that I think they got a better stimulus policy than one would have expected. Now, I don't know that they can get that again. I think it's possible they could get just the middle class or the under $250,000 tax cuts, but I don't think that is actually where we should be focusing, given the state of the economy. I'm more worried about stimulus right now than I am about tax rates.
You know, Ezra, we actually did discuss the elements of the deal last night on this show. The reason I've been concentrating on the reaction and on the strategy from this point forward is basically the kind of criticism that has broken out today about this deal. And actually last night there was some welcome surprise on the part of some progressive analysts on this program and elsewhere about how good the deal was, given how bad it could be under certain circumstances. What I'm not discussing, what we don't have the time to discuss, is the ideal. In my ideal, we would have several higher top tax brackets than $250,000. I would have a bracket at $1 million, at $10 million, at $100 million. It's crazy that we don't have higher brackets going up to these astronomical incomes. This is not what the president gets to think about as what is the ideal in the tax code. He has to think about, where do we get 60 votes in the Senate in order to go forward? Jane Hamsher, as an advocate of a deal in the past, given everything that Ezra has said about what's actually contained in this deal, which includes, by the way, an expansion of the earned income tax credit, which is an anti-poverty program built into the tax code that Republicans have never been in favor of. Do you agree with Ezra's analysis of the net value of what's in front of us compared to what we might see coming out of a Republican House of Representatives in next year?
I think the poor are being used as human shields to give billionaires tax cuts. I think that there is no way you can argue with a straight face that having an estate tax that is even better for rich people than anything George Bush ever had is in any way stimulative.
Hold it. No, that's not true. The estate tax today is zero. It is zero. There is a zero estate tax. The estate tax on January 1st under the Obama deal will be 35% on estates of $5 million and above. So we have a zero estate tax. Let's not let anyone pretend that the estate tax next year is somehow going to be lower than what George Bush managed to achieve for this year. You don't get lower than zero.
I'm sorry, Lawrence. This is not stimulative. There is no way. It was suggested by Blanche Lincoln. Keith Olbermann tonight was blistering in his attack on this. And nobody even wanted this. It just suddenly showed up on the table. Where the heck did that come from?
I can actually answer that question.
Ezra, go ahead.
It was the deal, the estate tax deal, and Jane is right. It is noxious. It is one of the worst policies you could possibly imagine, but it was a deal for the tax extenders. What the Republicans said was, if you don't do the Lincoln-Kyle estate tax deal, which costs about $10 billion over the next 2 years against what we had in 2009, which was a 35% rate and the $3.5 million exemption, there's no way we're doing a 2-year extension on earned income tax credit, on the American Opportunity tax credit, and on the child tax credit. Those add up to $40 billion, and they're for the poor. So I do take Jane's point here, but I would say that there's a tension here between whether what you think is more important is saying the rich are not going to get more, and I agree, we shouldn't be giving the rich more, or the poor are going to get more. We're going to give them more help. The help for the poor in this outweighs the help for the rich. And that, I think, is what is in its favor, even as the help for the rich is, frankly, from a stimulus perspective, a waste of money, and from an equity perspective, deeply unfair.
It pains me to say that that is going to have to be the last word in this double segment on this controversy. You're all going to be coming back on this show.